Bitcoin's kind of God-given in my view.
Wow.
God looked down and said, okay, you guys are really screwed up. You got a broken system. You're never going to be able to fix it unless I give you a tool. Here's the tool. This is the only commodity. It's really the first and only commodity ever that has a completely inelastic supply curve, which is to say, it doesn't matter what the price of Bitcoin is. They're not going to be more than 21 million of them. And so that's another thing, a point I would try to make to people looking at this. It's very hard if you look at it in investment terms. In the old model, there's never been anything like this before.
Yeah.
Okay. Which is why, by the way, it's outperforming everything else. Because there's never been anything, and there probably won't be again. I mean, this is a scarce commodity with a completely, perfectly inelastic supply. Every form of money that mankind has used for thousands of years has had growth in supply.
Through thousands of years of human existence, every form of money has been diluted.
Right.
Even gold, the soundest form of money before Bitcoin, grows in supply by an admittedly modest rate of 1.7% annually. So in less than 60 years, the supply of above-ground gold on the planet will double. The designers of Bitcoin created perfect money. It cannot be diluted. Said another way, they architected perfect, immutable, verifiable digital scarcity using code and algorithms. This is a very big deal.
It is a huge deal, and very few people understand it.
Welcome back to another episode of Cypherpunked. I'm joined by my good friend Larry Lepard, and we are going to discuss his book, Big Print, which is episode 8 of our series. Welcome.
Hey, nice to be with you again, Matty.
Today we're going to talk about embracing deflation a little bit.
Yeah.
I know this is taboo to many of the mainstream economists.
Yeah.
But Jeff Booth writes a fantastic book about this, and I'm hoping to have a series with him very soon here about the book, right on the back of all the stuff we're talking about with your book. Why has this become such a taboo thing to talk about deflation?
Well, as I think we've discussed in prior episodes, but we'll kind of reprise, the Keynesians have grabbed the economics discussion and said that that's really the only one that matters, that they've got the right model and the Austrians have the wrong one. And the Keynesian model is built upon continual growth and by any means, whether it's government spending or inflation or both. And so, and this, of course, serves them in their academic field, and it also serves the government and gives the government more power. And it serves the elite as well, who, as we've discussed, benefit from the inflation while the rest of us suffer. So I think that, what they've managed to do is they've managed to take one extreme example of deflation, which was the Great Depression from 1929 and 1939, and make that the boogeyman, the thing that we have to fear will happen again if we don't have at least a continual rate of 2% inflation. And in fact, that's not right. We've had many periods of deflation that have not led to a depression. In fact, we have some data that shows that out of 18 or 19 deflationary periods, really the Great Depression was the only one that was seriously.
It was the outlier.
It was the outlier, not the base case. But they've tried to make it the base case to support the thing which they support, which is the fiat currency and the debt and the whole system that benefits them. So, they've kind of defined away deflation as something that's good. And if you really think about what deflation is, we should just define it. Deflation is prices going down over time. And if you were a consumer, and let's point to an area where it's very obvious. Think about computers or cell phones, right? Yeah. Over the past 20 years, or TVs, they've just gotten better and better and better with less and less cost, and that's because of technological developments and increased productivity. And that kind of model can be
been horrible.
Yeah, it's been awful, right?
All of us just don't buy new phones and new stuff now, right?
As a result, yes, exactly. As a result of that, I remember buying a flat screen TV way back in the day when they first came out, the big ones, and I had thousands and thousands of dollars. I was like, Josh, do I really want to spend this much? But we wanted it, so we bought it. Get the same thing today for $300, right?
Yeah.
And so. That kind of productivity increase, maybe not to the same degree because microprocessors aren't involved in making food, but that kind of productivity increase can map itself out to all parts of society, and it should, but it hasn't because they've masked it by printing money to keep a positive rate of inflation.
Yeah, I've always found that totally ridiculous. This whole idea that you're not going to buy something because it'll go down in the future.
Well, that's right. And that's what they say. They fear that if suddenly deflation were to start to set in, consumers would pull back, and there would be, in fact, Bernanke even made a speech about it where he talked about the fear of excess savings. I mean, you can't have excess savings. Savings are a good thing, not a bad thing, but that's not how the Keynesians view it.
Yeah.
So.
Wild. So just to try to break down the Keynesian point of view, which is falling prices will cause consumers to delay purchases in anticipation of lower prices in the future.
Right.
This lack of spending, they claim, will thereby decrease aggregate demand and lead to a downward economic spiral.
Exactly. They argue that it's just going to become reflexive, and that pretty soon that argument falls apart because we do need things, and even if I know, like my cell phone, or take a TV, whatever. I mean, it might be cheaper in 5 years, but I don't want to go 5 years without a TV. I'm going to buy one now.
Yeah. And we see this with iPhones, right? Where like every year you buy the new iPhone. Pretty much most people buy the new iPhone when it's the same damn thing. It's just silly. It's silly.
Yeah. So that's I mean there's a great Janet Yellen quote, I think, in this chapter, I believe, where she talks about the fear of if deflation were to set in. I mean, and as I say, they've really kind of created it as a boogeyman.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, we can't let that happen because we'll have a deflationary downward spiral.
So you actually have a great chart in here of U.S. consumer pricing from the 1800s to the 1900s, which shows these two periods from the 1800 and 1900 of massive, CPI essentially going down of all these goods. And it was one of history's most dramatic improvements in living standards.
Absolutely.
So there is strong historical evidence to say it's completely ridiculous.
Yeah, now
this isn't just a conspiracy theory.
You've got to look back a little bit, right? You've got to go back into the 19th century, and most people have forgotten the 19th century. But we were on a gold standard, and the prices of things fell over time, and people's lives got better. The living standards significantly improved. I mean, as I say, I think I said the other day, we went from a nation of kind of farmers to an industrialized nation during the 19th century, and the increase in the quality of living was just remarkable for everybody.
The Great Depression was a unique event caused by the collapse of the largest credit bubble in history. Using this singular event to condemn all deflationary periods ignores broader historical evidence. And right below here, you point out that there's 90% of all the episodes of deflation, kind of throughout history here. There was no link to a depression. There was no link to any problems.
Correct.
And in fact, it was the complete opposite, right?
That's correct.
Living standards.
That's correct.
Massive, productivity gains.
But once again, they have twisted the facts and marshaled the depression argument to set up the system that benefits them, right? And nobody calls them on it. And another reason why I wrote the book, somebody's got to call these guys on this.
Yeah. I see here you wrote, deflation refers to a general decrease in prices, driven either by a decrease in the money available or increased productivity. I've heard people make an argument before. Have you ever heard this? That if it's caused by the decrease in the money available, then it is a problem. But if it's caused by increased productivity, then it's not a problem. Have you heard those distinctions?
Yeah, there's a little bit of that. I mean, if in theory, if you really did tighten the money available, and there are times in the 1800s when they tried that, and commodities prices fell 60%, and I mean there have been deflations which are over, too much and resulted as a result of as monetary contraction. And so your point's a good one. I mean, again, if you have a monetary base that's stable, gold or Bitcoin, they both grow. In Bitcoin goes extremely slowly, and gold goes pretty slowly. That's not going to happen. But yes, there were some periods where they did extreme monetary contraction and got deflation. I mean, there was one, I think it was actually after the War of 1812, and they recognized they didn't want to do that again.
Gotcha. An important thing to point out is that deflation is kind of like the natural order of things. If you don't fuck with the money supply, you naturally get this increased productivity and efficiency, and often that's driven by technological innovations, right? Like the internet, silicon chips.
And I think the other important thing to point out is it's broadly shared. Everybody benefits.
But my favorite part of all this, and I'm sure you appreciate this as well, is that it's kind of like the opposite of the Cantillon effect in the way that workers actually see an increase in real wages, right?
Yeah.
Their dollar goes further. They're able to buy more because wages typically don't fall as quickly as prices, right? So
Correct.
it's the inverse Cantillon effect where
Exactly.
the actual workers get this benefit, which I think is beautiful, right? It's like,
totally beautiful.
Hey, your salary might go down over time, potentially. That's a possibility. But that's usually the last thing. And your money goes further now. You're able to buy more
Exactly.
stuff.
Well, and savers are advantaged versus borrowers and financiers. I mean, as we've discussed at such great length, the system is set up to benefit the financiers, and the financiers get rich while everyone else pays the price. And that's the problem.
Yeah.
It's real simple.
You wrote here, this type of deflation is bad news for financial institutions and governments because as prices fall, debts become harder to repay.
Right.
Predictability. Our current system was designed to avoid this natural deflationary mechanism, prioritizing their interests over those of the general citizen.
That's exactly right. Exactly right. I mean, in the world that I envision where we are on a sound money standard, there will not be as much debt. There just people won't. I mean, people will view debt as a dangerous thing because I have to pay back in something that's actually going to cost me more. I mean, those who go into debt will actually get in trouble or fall behind, whereas those who save.
Well, I think we're already there in a lot of ways.
Well, yeah, we are with some people.
It's gotten so silly.
Credit card stuff for sure, but my point is, and those who save will really get ahead. I mean, it'll be. Right now the saver is kind of the screwy, so to speak. I mean, you save your money and you're getting stolen from. It'll become a case of you save your money and wow, you benefit. You really do better.
I think we've kind of reached that inflection point in society, like with all this terror stuff going on, and the kind of the working class kind of saying, hey, like we're being left behind here, the middle class evaporating. Yesterday on the Runway podcast, we kind of talked about. There was a whole thing about how demographic decline is like a big thing.
Well, yeah. Isn't it terrible?
And, I've been really thinking about that, and I've been reading some stuff, and it's like the only people who can afford to have kids, like I said, I'm blessed. I'm lucky to be a millennial that's able to have kids and do all this stuff. But, I have so many friends that are my age that like they don't have kids. They're not married. They can't afford it. They don't even own their own homes. They own nothing. Essentially, they own a car. Maybe that's about it.
It's awful. It's absolutely awful. I mean, I see my kids in their 20s. The hopes of them buying real estate are like zero, and they're all doing fine. I mean, and yes, the birth rates are down. I mean, and that's why we really are at a crisis stage where the young people today are at great risk of not being able to have the American dream, which is to say living better than their parents.
And
that's it's been stolen.
Well, I think the millennial generation is probably the first generation. We said this on the pod yesterday too, that that they're not better off at their parents at this time in the 30s. It's like
I saw that there was a good thing on Twitter of the net worth at 30. Did you see that that schedule? And it was like, wow.
There's a big difference.
It's a big difference.
And if you look at the demographics, this isn't just in America. I mean, it's definitely a thing in America, but even everywhere else in the world, you've got this kind of split where the extreme, the elite, the top 1%, they're having kids, they can afford it. And then you've got the bottom one, like the bottom couple percent that is on the government. They live off government subsidies, so they're able to have kids.
Interesting.
But the middle class, you can't afford it because you make just enough to not be able to afford it. Essentially.
Well, and when you're working 3 jobs, I mean, you don't even have time to make kids. Or you're too tired.
The other aspect of it is, and you can kind of feel this if you look at history. You can look and see maybe 50 to 70 years ago. It's like there was you were a wage earner and you worked hard, you worked your 9 to 5, you went into but you could afford a house and cars and a wife to stay home and have your kids, all of their needs taken care of.
I grew up in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and a lot of the people there, their parents worked in the assembly lines and worked for the big 3 automakers. And, they did fine. I mean, they
had a vacation.
They had a car. They had a house. They, I don't know if they always had vacations. Some did, some didn't. But they have a boat. I mean, and the wife stayed home and
took care of the house.
Kids played sports, and it was all. It all kind of worked.
It was the American dream.
It mathed out, so to speak. And it's hard to do today.
Yeah, it doesn't really math out anymore. Even if you're making, $100,000, $80,000 a year, like you try having 2 to 3 kids, and have a nice house with 4 bedrooms and a car for you and the wife. And I mean, it just doesn't.
Especially
the math
today.
Doesn't work.
Especially today. I mean, the housing thing really got broken when housing became money.
Yeah.
And when interest rates went up, and now we've got all these people trapped in 3% mortgages. So people aren't selling the small houses to move up because they can't afford the new mortgage. And so, the housing prices they're just wrong.
As Jeff Booth expertly advances in The Price of Tomorrow, we live in an inherently deflationary world. Productivity enhancements should make goods cheaper over time. I don't want to go too deep down, unpack Jeff's book, but can you talk a little bit about this idea that, we live in an inherently deflationary world, so it just makes sense that,
Yeah, and we should talk about that because there's something going on that Jeff points out that's very true, is that technology is changing the world.
Oh, no
and
doubt.
Technology is very, very deflationary, right? So Jeff makes this point, and I think it's a very good one, that as technology and AI and other things accelerate, natural deflation will accelerate. And in turn, we have a system that can't live with natural deflation because we've got all this debt. So, I mean, here's a for instance. What happens when AI replaces a lot of workers and those workers have debts and suddenly they're unemployed? How are they going to service their debts? I mean, they can't. And so, the two are really clashing in a very noticeable way, and it's getting worse. And so this is why when we were talking the other day, we were trying to figure out what's the time frame here. I mean, I think it's here and now. I mean, as in like the next 5 years, certainly the next 10 years. These two forces are going to, we cannot, I mean, just central point, and it's a brilliant one, is you cannot run a financial credit system that requires expansion on a economy that is naturally deflationary, because the naturally deflationary economy will make everything cheaper, and yet everything being cheaper is not something that debt owners or a debt-based society can sustain.
Another thing you point out here that is it's kind of abstract for so many people, and this is why it's so easy to fool people, is this idea of real terms. You measure prices and wages in real terms. Here, the definition you wrote is involves subtracting the inflation rate from the nominal rate. For example, if the nominal interest rate is 5%, but inflation is running at 2%, then the real rate of interest is 3%. So when people start hearing all these numbers and stuff, it gets
confusing. Well, let's also talk about another thing related to inflation. So nobody likes to hear that their wages are flat. Yeah, everyone wants bigger numbers over time.
Psychologically,
and everyone wants the value of their house to go up. And of course, there's that funny meme that shows me thinking I'm a good real estate investor, and it's really just an adult holding a kid up to the basketball net to dunk the ball, right? Because the parent is named inflation, right? I mean, in this, to get to real, I mean, here's a scenario: you're a worker and your wages are flat, but your grocery bill every year gets smaller. I mean, would you be okay with that?
Absolutely.
I know I would. I think, and I think most people would. But again, Keynesians are kind of the view that if everything's not getting bigger, that's a psychological burden that people have to bear.
Yeah, it definitely is. There's definitely a psychological aspect to that.
Yeah.
That I think is maybe one of the most difficult things to overcome. You ever? There's another funny meme of and we're going to talk about this later, but because it's covered kind of in later chapters, but. Like when Zimbabwe was hyperinflating and the stock market's going through the roof. And,
right.
There's all these Zimbabweans
celebrating. Yeah.
It's no. Yeah. No, it's not really going up. It's just massive asset inflation.
It's nominally going up.
Yeah.
And
but it's not really going up, which is
that's correct. That's the difference between real and this is subtle and tricky stuff.
It is, yeah.
Because you got a couple of series and they move differently,
Yeah. I think that's what what's so insidious about it is that they're playing all these number games, and it's just
Yeah, the average person. I mean, you shouldn't
not really comparing apples to apples.
You shouldn't have to be a financial expert to figure out this stuff. And in fact, they've set up the game so that it is confusing enough, and they gaslight us enough that we think, okay, they must know what they're doing. And they do know what they're doing, but what they're doing benefits them.
Two groups, however, fear deflation: financial actors and debtors. We talked about them a little bit. In a deflationary world, how do you see their role changing? Can they still participate?
Sure. There will be debt in a deflationary world. I mean, debt is a way of bringing purchasing power forward, right? And in a business sense, you take on debt if the use of the debt is going to give you more return than the cost of the debt. I mean, it's pretty simple. And so, yes, I mean, if you have a brilliant project that you think is going to yield a really high rate of return and you can't get equity to finance it, you're going to go and borrow. So there will still be debt. There just won't be as much. I mean, right now, there's just an enormous level of debt. And of course, debt when zero interest rates are 0%, debt is very, very cheap, and that of course distorted the system greatly. So, but again, the average intelligent investor is going to be much more cautious about using debt, and in turn, equity is actually going to provide better rates of return. I mean, you put up equity, and if the equity is deployed well, and invested well in projects that are worthwhile, you'll get. I mean, we'll go back to a world. I mean, I remember I'm old enough to remember in the early 60s, 70s, 80s, kind of. There was a time when investors actually really cared about dividends. And
really,
yeah, they really did. I mean, and there were people. I knew people who had bought, Ford Motor or General Motors in the 30s or 40s, or General Electric, and they annually got a dividend that was equal to a multiple of what they had paid for their stock, and they were living off of that.
Wow.
Yeah. Right. I mean, and
I've heard about these guys.
Yeah. Right. I mean,
I got some stocks that pay me that, but I just do this thing called DRIP, where it's like a dividend reinvestment program, and just put it back in the stock.
And that's good too. Yeah, that's good too. But the point is that. That was originally the whole concept of an equity investment in a stock was, okay, you're buying a share of the business makes a profit, and they're going to pay a piece of the profit to you. That's your dividend. And there were a lot of people who in the olden days used that dividend. That became their income source, and it would grow over time and so on and so forth. So there'll be a lot more of that, I think, in the world that we're looking at.
That's what they should do for, you mentioned the other day about how, all these CEOs and stuff are buying back their own stock.
Right.
It should be, if you pay a dividend, then you can use that to rebuy your own stock, and that way it kind of
well, exactly, and more importantly, in that CEO buying back his own stock, he's doing that. He's burdening the corporation to shove the stock price up to benefit his stock options.
Yeah.
So he's harming the corporation long term for his short term benefit. With a dividend payment, it's fair. It goes back to what we're talking about. It's equal and it's fair.
Yeah.
You own shares, you got your dividend.
Mm-hmm. I think that would be a nice middle ground, where if you pay a dividend, you can use what you've paid out to then buy back the shares with. That way you can't just do massive buybacks and manipulate the stock price, but only if you're providing value. Then it's somewhat capped. If you want
I see what you're saying.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I don't know, just an idea.
Yeah, it's an idea. I mean, I can see what you're saying.
Let's move along to my favorite chapter in the whole book. We've spent a lot of time talking about systemic issues and problems, but there is a bright future. There is a hope.
There really is. Yeah.
And this takes us to chapter 18. Bitcoin fixes this.
Yeah.
Bitcoin is a secure digital network that transfers digital value across time and space. Our listeners probably know about Bitcoin.
Right.
But for those who don't, let's unpack this. Okay.
Yeah, just very quickly, I mean, the way I like to summarize Bitcoin is that what happened is a person or a group of people who pseudonymously were known as Satoshi Nakamoto finally cracked the code of creating digital scarcity. This was an enormous technological innovation that had puzzled computer scientists for 40 years. And there were all kinds of prior attempts to do it, and none of them worked. Ultimately, they all had a flaw. Building on each prior attempt, whoever this group or person was, they finally put all the pieces together. The cryptography, the hashing, the
science,
it had computer, it had everything. And they recognized that the person who did it, we know, obviously understood Austrian economics and understood the problem with the money, because in the first block he said, "Chancellor on the brink," which he was referring to the bank, Chancellor Bank in the UK, close to failing, and he very intelligently decided, let's create a money supply that is fixed, where we do not have. Let's solve for the multi-thousand-year-old problem of every money gets diluted. And so, I think the way to look at this is that this guy or these people created true immutable digital scarcity. And, it's a little hard to get your head around that, because, when you think about something digital, you think, a computer file, a photograph, a video, you can copy it 1,000,000 times. There's nothing scarce about anything digital, okay? But money is a ledger, and in this system they devised, they created a scarce digital asset ledger, and we live in a digital world. And so I really sincerely believe that the world, financially will look back on this as the world pre-Bitcoin and the world post-Bitcoin. And very much in the way we looked at, I think of a similar thing. It's different. It was more of a physical property thing, but think of the world before mankind flew and the world after mankind flew. It just looked really, really different.
Yeah.
You had to get on a steamship or a train, and then suddenly there are human beings zipping around in airplanes. And, or
every couple centuries, or, there's these innovations that happen.
Just something
change.
Incredibly important. Yeah. The automobile, or, the printing press, or, it falls in the, and Saylor's done some great series on this where he talked about the history of technological development, and it falls in the bucket of really big technological innovations. And that's important to understand because those kinds of innovations, they ripple out and they change the world. Another more recent one that's actually very much in line with this one is the internet, right? Think about the world before the internet.
Look what it's done for access to information. It's
unbelievable. Messaging, mail, all of that. You've got the entire world's information history on a computer, and of course now you've got AI to help you access it instantly. So and by the way, I was involved in investing in the internet in the early days. We couldn't see all these things coming.
Yeah, it's hard to even understand, all of the implications, right?
That's right. That's the point I'm trying to make. In the early days, it's like, okay, this is neat. I can send email to my friend in California. I like that. That's better than calling him on the phone or sending him a message or doing a FedEx, right?
But you couldn't, have realized that now you're going to buy stuff through stores.
Exactly.
Or you're going to be able to access, the Wall Street Journal.
Or you and I were going to have Zoom and be able to sit on opposite sides of the world and record a podcast.
It's unbelievable.
There's just so many, right? And actually, I was really, it was fun watching it unwind. One of the first apps that really caught on big on the internet, I was really impressed with it when they did it, was eBay. So, and it made perfect sense, right? Everyone knows what a swap meet is. The problem is swap meets are very local. You're just going to go down or garage sale. I'm going to sell my shit at a garage sale. Fine. Well, what if you had a worldwide garage sale? Well, that's eBay, right? And it was just, I was like, so cool. When it popped up, I was like, my God, what a brilliant idea, and so these innovations lead to more innovations and things and we can't even foresee all of the things I think that Bitcoin is going to bring to us. I think I would just add one other thing about this digital scarcity. The other thing I think that it's done for the first time in a long time, or in a major way for humanity, is it's mathematically verifiable truth. Yeah. In other words, if it's on the blockchain, it really happened. There was proof of work that got done to put it on the chain.
It's funny that you say that, just because there's this whole debate going on right now in Bitcoin Core. This whole thing that's going back and forth. But what you just said is so important. And Bitcoin is money, of course. It's the most important money in all of human history. But that ledger, and being able to put on mathematical truth to that ledger.
Yes.
Satoshi's very first thing that he ever did was he used this OP return thing to post that political message about on the brink of bailout of banks, right? There are other implications for that.
That's the point.
And the ability, I know some people are using it for elections now. I think it's called, what is it? Something Truth. Paul, do you remember the name of the election company that's hashing stuff and putting the election proof on there? When they,
I recall them at our Bitcoin meetup, but I don't exactly recall. It was simply something. But let me
something with has to do with truth. But being able to use that ledger to, if you pay, right, if you're willing to pay for the proof of work that it requires to stamp something in history for all of time, right? Like on that blockchain. That's a powerful thing.
It really happened.
It really happened.
You know that it happened, and it's there. And I don't think any of us really fully understand the implications of that. But I think that there will be implications to that. Is my guess.
Right. Yeah, it's very interesting. For you, when you heard about Bitcoin or found out about, were you skeptical at first? What was your
very much? Yeah, I'll take you through my story. I mean, I was aware of it in the Ron Paul days when it was, it had no value actually in the early days. People were mining it and stuff, and I was kind of like, okay, fine. And shame on me, right? I really, because I could have, gotten a lot of it very cheaply like Max did. But, what I did was I made the mental heuristic of, we've tried this and it doesn't work.
Yeah.
There was BitCold and eCash and, the Chaumian stuff. I mean, there were a lot of attempts. I mean, there were like 6 or 7 of them.
So you were familiar with all these?
I was familiar with all those.
Okay.
I was aware of them. I was aware that people were trying to make money on the internet, create some kind of internet money. I was aware of that. But I also was aware that every time it had been tried, it didn't work.
Wow.
And so these guys are trying it. I'm kind of like, yeah, okay, great. But, we know that doesn't work because these other 7 times it didn't work, right?
Yeah.
It's a logical thought. But then when it got to $1, and the pizza transaction occurred, I didn't pay attention to that. I didn't see that. But then it was started trading at $1 or $2. And then it went up to, $100. And I kind of woke up. I was like, hang on a second. This isn't just pennies and it's working. And we're now probably in the 2011, 12. I don't know when it first hit $100. Maybe it was 12, 13. When and I was kind of like, wow, this is interesting. Maybe I should pay attention to this. And I did some research. And, okay, let's see. I gotta get a paper wallet. I gotta go and give some guy some money. And he's going to tell me that this QR is going to take me to the coins. And I don't know. Sounds kind of sketchy. I'm not sure I'm going to do that. Well, so I didn't. And then then they said, well, no, you can buy it through a brokerage. And there's this one in Japan, right?
That was a little bit before my time.
Yeah.
Thank God.
And I'm actually trying to blank on the name of it now. Everyone, Mt. Gox.
Yeah.
And I actually, so I go and I get on their website and I start downloading their forms. I'm thinking, all right, I got to fill these forms out and I got to wire them somebody when they failed.
Yeah.
I was kind of like, oh boy, and I was like, whoo, glad I missed that one. Although actually, it worked out okay for the people who were in there. They still got
I think they're getting some claims now.
Oh, they are, and it was like 100 times their money.
Wow.
The problem is they had to wait a really long time where it was illiquid. Even though they lost like 80% of the coins,
it's still
the 20% that remained got so valuable.
What that's hilarious is that actually this is probably the best thing that happened to most of those people because they had no idea what they had
and they couldn't sell it. And they woke up. Yeah. So if I think my understanding from somebody who had money there is that they got like 100-to-1 payout on the money they had there. But
unbelievable.
But they had to wait. I think that payout was just a few years ago. So they had to wait almost 12, 15 years. Something like that. But anyway, so Mt. Gox came along, it failed. Well, then Coinbase went public in 2013. So now you have a publicly traded, venture capital backed, American, San Francisco based company that can sell you. I was like, okay, I get it. Yep, fine. So I signed up. And I got a Coinbase account. I went and bought a handful of coins.
Nice.
And, it was like $300 a coin or something like that. So, and that was great. And so now I'm in the game and I'm like, all right, I got to, what have I done here? And so I started looking around and it turns out there were Bitcoin meetups at MIT. Yeah. And I was living in Boston. So, I go to these Bitcoin meetups and I'm sitting there and I'm sitting next to a guy and I say, how are you involved with this? He says, well, I'm one of the core developers. And he's,
oh, wow.
I said, really? Yeah, I'm a math PhD. I'm here. I'm getting my doctorate at MIT, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, that's pretty cool. And I said, let me ask you something. Do you think this thing is reliable? And, how much money can you put in? Is this technology, is it real? Where are we here? And he said, well, it's still kind of an experiment. And every now and then we'll make some changes to it. And I think to myself, I'll go home that night and I think, oh, fuck, I probably blew the whole network up. and this guy who's much better at what he's doing than I am. And he's saying that. And I'm thinking to myself, God, how much money can I really put here? Do you know what I mean? There's technical risk. This is 2013. But over time, it kept getting better and better. And as everyone knows, there were some hard forks, and I got all those. Of course, immediately when I got them, I sold them if I could. And then, there were there was a blockchain, the block size war, and all that stuff. And I watched all that, and just over time, and I started learning about what I had. When I bought the coins at Coinbase, did I know what the difficulty adjustment was? No. Did I know what the halving was? No. I didn't understand any of that shit.
I tell most people that, there's still people that come to me all the time. It's like, oh, I should have listened to you 5 years ago. Oh, I should, I tell them, listen, like the best time to buy Bitcoin
is yesterday.
Was 5 years ago when I told you to, but the second best time to buy it is right now.
It's like planting a tree.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. It's like you just got to get off zero, get the game.
Exactly.
Then you'll understand. You'll start to see the fluctuations in fiat terms, and you'll look at it and you'll research it and you'll want to be more interested in it because now you are an owner of this network. You actually
exactly.
The most brilliant thing about Bitcoin that's so different than the internet is that like you couldn't really own the infrastructure of the internet essentially, right? Like you could use it.
There were some great apps that you could own that became very valuable.
Yeah, but all the value accrued not to the protocol layer itself, it accrued to the huge corporations and companies that built on top of it, right? Bitcoin is the opposite. And, there will be things built on top of Bitcoin that's extremely valuable, right? Like it will have the app layer too. But that base layer, that protocol layer, you can own a piece of the protocol.
Yeah, I mean, it's sailors, you're buying a part of digital Manhattan. Or digital Miami Beach real estate. I mean, there will only be these 21 million coins. They are scarce, and that means that it's going up forever. And so, so my journey was I just got more and more convicted. And by 2017, I was pretty much all in, and I bought all the way through the fall of 2017 ramp up to 17,000. I was paying 17,000 per coin. It was amazing to me that post Sam Bankman-Fried, you could buy them for 15, and that was wild. That's a bunch of years later, right?
Yeah.
But anyway, and so, I bought them all the way up into 17,000. And then of course we had a major correction. It went down to 9 and I doubled down. It went down to 4.5. I doubled down again.
Nice.
Actually close to triple down. But honestly, I have to say throughout all that time, I was, I always thought that there were two major risks to Bitcoin. The first was that technology was not sound. Mm-hmm. And now 16 years in, 890 some odd thousand blocks, I'm less worried about, knowing how the core developers operate, et cetera. Although this op thing bugs me a little bit, but so I always was worried the technology wasn't sound, but time and history and blockchain wars, all that stuff, it got me comfortable with it, or block size wars. The other thing I was always worried about is adoption going to continue? I mean, as the Austrian model says that money is what we all agree is money. Well, if everyone lost interest in Bitcoin, or if something better came along, then Bitcoin would be at risk. But what, there are metrics you can look at, hash rate, users, wallets, all kinds of things. And what I was very pleased to see over all these years, they just kept growing.
Yeah.
And so as long as it kept growing, then this is what in the venture capital world and in my book, I said this is, what we used to call dogs eating the food. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I mean, is there real evidence that people are using the thing?
Yeah.
And as long as that evidence is growing, stay with the trend.
Yeah, I mean, it's
right?
If you look at the fundamentals, you couldn't be more bullish looking at the fundamentals.
Right.
I just tell people is like, look at this over time. I mean, look at the number of wallets, look at the number of the users.
Right.
It's just a no-brainer.
It's a total no-brainer. And for those who think we're too late, take a look at my book and take a look at some of the adoption curve charts. I mean, it appears to me we're just at the inflection point where it's about to really go mainstream. I mean,
that S curve.
5 or 10 years ago, nobody knew what Bitcoin was. 5 years ago, some people knew what Bitcoin was. I would say now most of the world at least knows or has heard of Bitcoin. It'd be hard to live in this world and not know what it is. But that doesn't mean they bought it. I mean, I was watching a show last night, and there was some politician who said, "Well, at least this thing's not a Ponzi like Bitcoin." I thought to myself, "Oh God,
we're still so early.
People just don't get it yet."
Yeah. I mean, you're not wrong. There's asymmetric upside still, right?
Oh, big time.
When everybody understands it and gets it,
And what does the sailor said? I want something that nobody understands and everybody needs.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what this is.
I think you actually say that later in your book too, talking about when you invest in things, and that's one of the things you look for is that something that you get before everyone else gets. You want to be early. Yeah, you want to be early. Yeah, and we're still incredibly early. But that being said, nation states and huge corporations, they're starting to wake up.
That's changing.
They're starting to understand the fundamentals.
It's clearly changing, and we had these enormously positive developments. I mean, the ETF suddenly made every stock investor a potential Bitcoin buyer, and that's a big deal.
One other thing I want to touch on before we move on here, and you actually have a great explanation of Bitcoin nodes here, so I highlighted that, but also Bitcoin miners. So I'm a miner, and what Bitcoin miners do essentially, and I'm going to read what you wrote here. Bitcoin miners are individuals or entities that purchase computing power to satisfy 3 basic roles for the network. Number 1, confirm transactions. Number 2, secure the ledger. And 3, participate in the fair distribution of new Bitcoins. A costly endeavor requiring specialized hardware and electricity, miners are incentivized through block rewards and transaction fees. They use electricity and computing power to attempt to verify block transactions. Their expense is electricity. Their revenues are block rewards and transaction fees. Satoshi was very clever in how he designed this system, right? He modeled Bitcoin after gold in a lot of ways, right? The reason gold was chosen as the best money in human history throughout time, right, is because It's not easy to get more gold.
No.
It is very costly. It requires hard work to mine for that gold. And then what you get. You get a small amount of yield, right? A very small amount of yield. And it's been historically very difficult to increase that yield. I mean, there are time periods, like the gold rush and stuff where you can kind of increase it, but not really increase it in the same way that you can with silver or copper or some of these other metals, right? So if the demand for gold went up greatly, you could increase the supply a little bit, but not by much. Satoshi took this even further. With his ability to adjust the inflation rate, essentially. He locked it. So no matter how many more machines you put online and how much electricity is used, there's still going to only be roughly X amount of Bitcoin every 10 minutes, right?
Right.
That mechanism will adjust and make it
the
more
difficulty
difficult to
adjustment
find it.
was one of the most brilliant parts of the whole model. Yeah.
Which, if you think about money, I find this to be incredibly fair, right? Like everybody knows what the inflation rate is going to be. There's no surprises. There's no surprise! We printed $5 trillion for COVID, and we're giving it away to everybody.
Right. Well, that's why this thing is going to win, because human beings want a fair system, and this is a fair system.
Yeah.
We all play by the same rules, and nobody can change them.
And there's this real cost of production to create this asset, right? So, as a miner myself, I'm paying 6 figures, 7 figures in electricity every month just to be able to mine this Bitcoin. And then, as a producer, you're not going to, you have to sell to cover your costs, but you're not going to sell that for less than what it costs you to, so there's this natural floor that gets created, right? It just makes sense, if you're a miner, whether it's gold or copper, it's like you're not going to sup for less than what the equipment, the employees, the electricity costs, all the costs that you put in, you're not going to sell for less or you would be out of business, right?
Correct.
So, there's that natural price floor there because of that, right? Which is kind of cool.
It's very cool.
Because it's real world economics that are playing out on the internet, right? In a digital economy. So fascinating. And then the other explanation you put here, where you talked about Bitcoin nodes. So nodes are a small computer or machine that anybody can run, right? To verify. It allows you to plug into the network. You're not mining with your node, but you can verify transactions if you need to send money, if you need to receive money, or you can actually see on the blockchain, okay, did this transaction actually happen, right?
Correct.
You're keeping your own copy of Bitcoin's history since inception.
Well, and that's the beautiful thing. Think about the redundancy of having 20,000 plus copies of the blockchain.
Yeah, there might even be more now. I mean,
there probably are.
Yeah. So you wrote, Bitcoin nodes are privately owned computers and devices that verify all transactions in blocks against protocol rules. They prevent double spending and maintain the entire history of the blockchain. When a user submits a transaction to the Bitcoin network, it is picked up by a node and then propagated to other nodes. If a transaction is valid, it is added to the node's pool of unconfirmed transactions, or mempool, until a miner includes it in a block. So, important to think about when you send a transaction on Bitcoin, it doesn't automatically just go on the blockchain, right? It sits in this place called a mempool, which is all the nodes all over the world are talking to each other 24/7 over the internet and saying, hey, these are all the transactions. When a miner mines a block roughly every 10 minutes, that miner, whoever was lucky to solve that block, gets to look at those transactions. And usually what the miner will do is they'll take the ones with the highest fees that are paying the most, and they're going to put those as priority, because that signal to the market is saying, hey, these transactions need to go through now. Where sometimes I might submit a transaction where it's like, I don't care if it goes through for 24 hours, for 48 hours, I'm going to pay a lower fee. It could sit in that mempool for longer. I don't need urgency to send it, right? I just need to know it needs to go in the next couple of days.
Eventually.
Yeah. But a lot of people are like, hey, I'm going to buy a car, or I'm going to buy a house, or hey, I need to send this money across the world.
I want verification within 10 minutes.
Exactly. So you're going to pay a little bit higher fee, and the miners are going to take those transactions first in the mempool from the nodes, and they're going to publish that as a block, right? And that's going to be the new block that's stamped in history forever. It's going to go on that blockchain, and it's going to stack on all the other blocks, and then everybody can look at that and say, okay, this is history. This is what happened. It's that verifiable truth. So that is the role that the nodes play here. So once it's in that mempool, the miner stamps it into the blockchain, then that transaction is processed. It's verified. The nodes all contain a copy of the blockchain and are why Bitcoin is said to be a distributed network with no single point of failure. An important aspect to note is that Bitcoin is one of the slowest blockchains for a reason, right? And you're kind of trying to talk about this a little bit more. But
the trilemma.
The trilemma. There's these three aspects of security and security and
Security, speed, and decentralization.
There you go. Yeah. So Bitcoin isn't optimized for speed on the base layer.
No.
Right? It's
slow.
Really optimized to be decentralized, censorship-resistant money that's maximally secure and
Very
protected.
secure.
Yeah. So the nodes themselves, these little tiny Raspberry Pis, you can even use a little Raspberry Pi, which is what I've had a Raspberry Pi for 5-6 years now that I'm still using with the same hard drive to run the copy of Bitcoin's history since inception, right? So having that small block every 10 minutes doesn't use a lot of data. So everybody can run the history of all of Bitcoin's transactions. We're just talking about really transaction data for the most part. A little bit of, these OP return stuff where you can put images or certain things, but it's still incredibly a small amount of data because you can only have a block every 10 minutes and it's only like 1 megabyte, right? So really, it's a fascinating design by Satoshi and the way he designed and set up the system to be this beautiful money. At this point in time, even today, the computing power behind the Bitcoin network makes it the largest distributed computer network in the world. I thought that's fascinating. We're already it's so early. Yet
I
asked
ChatGPT. I think there's been like $24 billion invested in hardware technology and power technology to mine, to run the Bitcoin network. I mean, that's a lot of money.
Yeah. Oh, trust me.
You're a piece of that.
Yeah, it is. But this is important, right? Like this network is insanely important. And the beautiful part of that is that the more important the network becomes, the more there is a financial, there's an incentive. The price is telling you, hey, this network is important and we need to secure it better. So and as Bitcoin continues to grow and become more important,
and we should talk about governance and core developers and changes and how really no change or upgrade can be made without a consensus of the miners and the nodes accepting the new change. And since everybody who's in it has a vested interest in seeing it continue to work and appreciate and value, I think that's a very strongly built-in protection mechanism against a malicious change of any sort.
Absolutely. And you see, we've kind of seen that, as time has gone on, that anybody that tries to change something, in the actual code base of Bitcoin itself, like stuff that's not like that stacks on top as complementary pieces, it's very difficult to make any change because people says this is a brilliant system that's working, don't touch it. And that's what ends up happening most of the time, right? People are not, they're not going to have it. They're not going to go with it, even if it's minor things like, hey, don't mess with this beautiful system. And we've seen that play out through the past 15 to 20 years, essentially.
Right.
Even right now, it's like they're trying to talk about making changes and people are like, no, we're not going to change anything. Right. So, the people have the power, the individual nodes get to vote. Right. So anybody runs.
Yeah. I mean, look, anybody can fork. I mean, people say, well, hang on a second. There could be a new Bitcoin. There could be something better. There could be something different. And anyone can hard fork it at any time and say, hey, I've got a better solution. I'm going over here. I'm taking this direction.
Yeah.
Problem is no one will follow them. Everyone's going to ignore it. I mean, the hard forks that occurred in the earlier periods, they died.
Essentially, yeah. The system was designed with a 21 million hard cap on the number of Bitcoins that will ever exist. I personally think this is one of the most ingenious. I mean, there's so many beautiful parts of Bitcoin, but this idea of absolute scarcity.
Yeah.
Absolutely scarce. I don't know if there's another asset that's ever had this.
Well, certainly as a commodity, if you define Bitcoin as a commodity, and the SEC has, and others do, because a digital Bitcoin, they're all fungible. Every other commodity in the world is subject to the law of supply and demand. And so, if, for example, let's take some other commodities: oil's a commodity, gold's a commodity, wheat's a commodity. If the price of those items goes higher, then there will be incentive for people to drill for more oil, mine more gold, plant more wheat, and that'll bring the price back down. This is the only commodity, it's really the first and only commodity ever that has a completely inelastic supply curve, which is to say, it doesn't matter what the price of Bitcoin is, they're not going to be more than 21 million of them. And so that's another thing, a point I would try to make to people looking at this. It's very hard if you look at it in investment terms in the old model. There's never been anything like this before.
Yeah.
Okay. Which is why, by the way, it's outperforming everything else because there's never been anything, and there probably won't be again. I mean, this is a scarce commodity with a completely perfectly inelastic supply, which is why the price can actually ultimately become infinite.
In the words of Larry Lepard in all caps, having a form of money that is fixed in supply is literally a once in humanity type of event.
Yeah, and I kind of borrowed that concept from Jesse Meyer because he has something that goes once in a species.
Yeah.
I mean, it really is. It's that big a deal. Every form of money that mankind has used for thousands of years has had growth in supply.
Through thousands of years of human existence, every form of money has been diluted.
Right.
Even gold, the soundest form of money before Bitcoin, grows in supply by an admittedly modest rate of 1.7% annually. So in less than 60 years, the supply of above ground gold on the planet will double. The designers of Bitcoin created perfect money. It cannot be diluted. Said another way, they architected perfect, immutable, verifiable digital scarcity using code and algorithms. This is a very big deal.
It is a huge deal.
I agree, Larry.
And very few people understand it, you know.
You have a little note here about Bitcoin are lost when someone loses or misplaces their private keys or passphrase for accessing their Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Can you explain that process a little bit, kind of how that works?
Well, I mean, I think one of the great challenges of Bitcoin is custody.
Yeah.
You know, as we all know, you know, how do you own a Bitcoin? You have a public address that anyone can see, and if you give somebody your public address, say this is mine, they can look at it and say, oh, you know, any computer anywhere in the world can access a public address. Say, oh, there's one coin there. That's you know the what's outward facing to the world. What's inward facing is you have your private keys that allow you to access. The ownership of that is really
the true bearer nature of it.
The true bearer nature is having the private keys, which used to be a string of 256 characters, and now has become 12. They, you know, because of BIP 39, has become 12 or 24 keywords, which in order will recreate that string. And but you know, that's a tricky process. I mean, you know, having a wallet and knowing how to do that is not for, you know, the technologically you know, inexperienced. And so, and this, by the way, is why the ETFs are such a big thing. That this whole custody problem gets solved at a certain level, you know, for people who don't want to own their own coins and keep their own keys. But, you know, these keys, this private key, this is like the nuclear code.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, I mean, and I think all Bitcoiners have probably lost a private key at one time in their life. And, you know, in early days, people were more casual with them. And you know, if you lose the keys, you lose the coins, and they're there. So there are 21, it's true, though, there are 21 million Bitcoin outstanding. Some of them are actually not accessible. I mean, it's been estimated that between 5 and 20% of the coins in existence, the keys got lost somewhere. I mean, if you recall, there was a great story of some guy in England who was trying to get the rights to dig up his computer, which was in a landfill, because it had a lot of Bitcoins in it.
Billions of dollars in this landfill, and the city doesn't want to allow him to do it.
The city wouldn't let him do it. Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't make any sense to me. You just say, hey, we'll give the city half of this money, this value. I mean,
right. So the point is that you know, I mean, look, you don't get this digital scarcity without the incredible responsibility of managing your own keys. Yeah. And that for some people that's very, very scary, and it's you know, it's got to be taken seriously.
Yeah, I mean, I always encourage people to, you know, start with like a Coinbase or something, so you just like understand it, and then from there we kind of at our meetup once they have a certain amount, we're like, hey, this is amount. If I lost this, I'd kind of like be upset, you know, if something happened here. Right. Then it's like, okay, let's learn about self-custody. And it is a process, it's an education that comes along with it, right? You know, the easiest way to explain it to people is it's kind of like an email address, right? Where like, if you have an email address, you can receive emails to that address. If you can give it to people, that's your public address, right? But if you want to send from that address, right?
You gotta have a password.
You gotta have the password, right? So if you have that password, the password is everything with Bitcoin. That is your true, the aspect of custody. If you have that password, only you can send from that address. Correct. Nobody else. So you truly own your keys. We call it, you know, you own not your keys, not your coins. You own those keys, and then you're the only one that can send it. Nobody can take those keys away from you unless you give it. And you know, if anybody that has it has access to your wallet, they can take your money. It's kind of like burying gold in a desert, and only you know where that gold is, right? But if you tell other people, hey, this is my key, this is where I bury my gold, they can take it. Yeah,
they can swipe your gold.
In the same way as if you don't record where you store your gold, you can lose it, right? If you lose that key, you're gonna lose access to it, and there's just no way around it. There's no centralized third party that you can go to that's going to say, hey, reset my password for me and help me, you know, because then it's not truly a bare asset. Right. But that's kind of the mental hurdle to overcome for a lot of people to understand that. It's funny you mentioned the guy with the landfill. I read something the other day that there's somebody else now too that I guess he was want to say he was like a drug dealer or something, and he had put in his private keys, and he had bought a bunch of Bitcoin back in the Mt. Gox days or from Silk Road or whatever, and he had put it in his like fishing pole thing, his case, and he had his private keys there, and like when
somebody found it,
he went to jail, I guess, and his landlord had threw away all of his old stuff and kicked him out and put it in the landfill. But supposedly it's so much that it's billions of dollars now.
Oh no!
Isn't that wild?
That's terrible.
Yeah, it's wild. In the words of Satoshi, everyone who loses their keys is like I think he said is like, think about it like a small donation to everybody else.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, kind of funny. Obviously we now have people like Michael Saylor who are really taking Bitcoin to the next level in the sense of using it as assets that you can hold on your balance sheet for companies, kind of like a savings vehicle. We've got nation states that are now coming into the equation. We've talked about how we believe that this is an invention that's very pivotal for humanity, right? It's going to reshape the world. Here you mentioned fire, the wheel, brass, steel, gunpowder, all these different things, the printing press, super important inventions that have changed the course of humanity. As we proceed to a increasingly digital world, this idea of Bitcoin as digital energy, the soundest form of money that's ever existed. An easy way to explain it to certain people is, you've seen how we've gone from like letters to email, and we've gone from the analog to the digital in so many different aspects. When I make the case to people that are very skeptical, that's kind of the explanation I use. I said, there needs to be sound money on the internet, right? Like, especially gold bugs. They really, they can't. I mean, Peter Schiff is another example. It's like they just can't make the jump, make the leap. It's like a cognitive dissonance there, right? In their defense, I mean, there've been some parts of the industry that send the warning signals and get everybody thinking, "Oh, this is just bullshit."
Yeah,
I
mean,
the Sam Bankman-Frieds and the shitcoiners haven't really done, haven't done us any favors, right? I mean, there's a lot of noise that has obscured a very strong signal in this one asset.
Yeah.
And because, as we all know, Bitcoin's not the only cryptocurrency. There are tens of thousands of them, and many of them are fraudulent.
Yeah, I mean, the way I think about it is much like the early days of the internet, where there's all these different things that are happening, and a lot of it was noise, right? Like scams or failed companies or whatever. I do think there are other crypto assets personally that have value. I just think that Bitcoin is so important, and what its use case is like for money, like this money problem is like the most premier important problem.
I don't disagree that there can be other cryptos that work, but I think you would probably agree with me that many other cryptos are just pointless.
Oh, no doubt. I would say 95% or more. It's probably will trend to zero, disappear forever, and or they're just pumping up scams or whatever.
Exactly.
So,
and sadly that has hurt this industry because people got caught up in those. They lost money. They think, they fell for, I think I like Lynn Alden where she said, Bitcoin is the iPhone and all these other coins are photographs of iPhones. So, you can carry around a photograph of an iPhone and say, I have an iPhone, but if you really don't have the real thing, it's pointless.
Yeah. I think it's important to understand if you're going to be involved in, Web3 and the crypto space in general, like Bitcoin, I always push people, like they come to me, what thing should I buy to get rich? You need to understand Bitcoin first.
This is the base layer.
It's the base layer of all this. And it's the most important,
That's exactly right.
Like sound money on the internet, like this is such an important existential problem. And like nothing competes with Bitcoin as sound money. Like, you have these, like Ethereum is really cool. It's a smart contract platform. It's programmable, kind of like, it's got monetary characteristics.
No, there are use cases for other coins.
Yeah.
And some of them will survive.
Some of them will, some of them won't, but Bitcoin as this sound money is the most important
by an enormous measure.
Yeah, exactly. You mentioned this Michael Saylor's masterclass interview with the Atlas Society. He really
that was a great interview.
Yeah. I know Bitcoin doesn't have a CEO and we have no centralized parties, but man, he really
I tell you, he's done so much for this area. It's unbelievable.
just a communication to people to understand.
Yeah.
Like, you know, I just
Well, he's so smart,
Yeah.
and he's you know, and he's put his money where his mouth is.
Mhm.
And
you put here after listening, you will understand why Bitcoin is destined to become the base layer of global money. I could not agree more.
Right.
You know, I think many of us Bitcoiners, once you really fully get it and understand it, you're like, this is inevitable, right? Like that's how I feel. Like this is inevitable
Yeah.
as the base layer of neutral money.
yeah,
For
the only issue is what's the slope of the curve.
Exactly. And this gets me to some of my favorite parts of this, where we get to make fun of Paul Krugman.
He deserves it.
He definitely deserves it. And like, did he ever show any remorse for any of this stuff? Did he ever like?
Not that I'm aware
you're
of.
aware of. Did he ever say like, yeah,
Maybe.
I got that one wrong or something? Like, I
He
really
probably did, but I haven't seen it.
He does. He's back to his old tricks though, because he keeps bashing Bitcoin.
Oh, did he? I haven't seen it
I
recently.
don't forgive him yet. When the internet spread commercially in 1993 marked the beginning of widespread adoption, Nobel Prize-winning Keynesian economist Paul Krugman said it had no more utility than the fax machine. That's just classics.
Yeah. And he also said that Metcalfe's law wouldn't hold.
Here you wrote, the Bitcoin network and using Bitcoin as money is a better choice than storing value in fiat currencies like the dollar, which are programmed to debase and be diluted over time. Doesn't it logically make sense that over time more and more people will choose the form of money that treats their savings the best? It seems obvious and certain to me. And I think we have seen that. I mean, like it's inevitable.
I mean, you know, full disclosure with the admitted volatility. Right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, you know, as a new asset is being priced into a market,
Exactly.
You know,
I mean, and that's a criticism of Bitcoin that's valid, but you know, it's higher highs and higher lows. I mean, you know, you've got to be willing to withstand the drawdowns, and that's why we all talk about hodling.
And that volatility has muted over time.
Oh, absolutely. It's decreasing,
but I still think
it'll continue.
Yeah, I think it's going to continue, and
Yeah.
we're at like what 1%. You know, penetration really. I mean, you're still so early. You know, as you move up that S curve, the opportunity will go. Upside opportunity will.
I mean, the drawdowns, the past drawdowns. There was one as large as 90%. There were a couple in the 70s or 80s. I mean, I think that I don't think we'll see that large again. But you know, is it possible? In my view, Bitcoin could easily go to 400 here, and then 400,000 a coin, and then it could draw down 50% to 200.
Have you followed Josh Mandel?
Yeah, I love him. He's
that
funny.
Guy's classic.
He's a funny guy.
Man, did you see his call and like how he predicted it like 8 months in like a year? It was like a year. It was like ridiculous. He's like, yeah, on this day it's going to be this price. Like,
yeah, he's a really smart guy, and he got that one right. And I'm not sure if that was just having the right model or if he was just lucky.
I mean, that blew my mind.
It did happen.
Like, you know, but he doubled down on that over time. Like I watched him, I'm like, this guy's fucking crazy. Was this a kook? He like says this thing like, how can you predict Bitcoin's price like months in advance?
He's a very smart guy.
And then like as time went on, he's like doubling down on this prediction, and then boom, sure enough, the day it goes, it just hits that price. It's like I'm like, wow, this guy is unbelievable. So if he was just lucky, wow, but it seems like there was some serious thought that went into.
Oh, he's a very smart guy and a good investor.
So really, really funny, a cool story, I think. With the Bitcoin network, you are self-sovereign. This gives individuals an enormous weapon against state overreach. Some Bitcoiners, myself included, believe Bitcoin may even curtail government instigation of wars because it will have no means of paying for them. It cannot get the money. This is my hope and that of many Bitcoiners.
We've talked about that.
We have talked about this, which, this is obviously one of the most appealing aspects of Bitcoin, at least to myself. And I know you said as well.
I totally
agree. It really demonetizes the incentive for violence because you just, the new base layer of money cannot be confiscated. It cannot be stolen. It has to be given freely, right? Yeah. It can't even, for the most part, be known that it exists if you don't reveal yourself, right? So it's it's an incredible breakthrough in human history, I think.
I agree.
For thousands of years, right? Like we kind of talked about war and the way it worked before, the modern day when they can just print all this money was if you went to war, you were a soldier, like you got to pillage and plunder and steal. Like that's kind of like they let that go because that was what kind of some of the incentive, right?
Right.
That incentive greatly goes away when people can store most of their wealth in a uncensorable, permissionless, peer-to-peer distributed money, right?
Right.
It's beautiful. It really is. Mm. You're right here about the private means of sending money, right? So the private means of sending money is very empowering. One of the most compelling early use cases was wealthy people in China who were trying to get their wealth out, but were restricted by their government. Many bought Bitcoin, traveled to Vancouver, converted their coins back to fiat, and purchased homes. I love this aspect of Bitcoin because when people, there's so many great stories, and we're going to talk about them like a little bit. I wonder if it's this chapter where you have some of the Alex Gladstein stuff.
Oh yeah,
so
that's
really,
fantastic stuff.
Yeah, I think some of it is in here, but just so people kind of understand why this is so important, is that this allows people to store their wealth and leave situations of war.
Yes.
Of a government that's corrupt and like authoritarian and like and half the world lives under these jurisdictions. And even today in Western first world countries, we're starting to see some implications of why this could be important, right? We think we have it so good, but even here in the first world, and you mentioned here, who BJ Dichter is a good friend of mine, and I'm sure you know him as well.
Yeah, right.
The Canadian trucker protest, right? He's got his book, Honking for Freedom, and we're actually going to do a series on his book as well because it's an important use case of why the Bitcoin technology is very important. When all of a sudden, most people don't realize that, the ledger that we all use today, these centralized ledgers, they can very, very easily be just completely wiped out.
And Russia just discovered that, right? I mean, Russia had $600 billion of treasury securities, and the government just grabbed them.
Yeah.
I mean, we live in a system where, we're one step away from the government grabbing your money. Mm-hmm. And that's the beauty of Bitcoin, right? If you have your keys, the government can say, give me the money, but you can say, sorry, I'm not going to do that.
Or I lost it, or I don't have it, or the password's gone, or I hit my head. Or
it's independent money that's you're totally self-sovereign is what we like to say. And that's a really big deal if governments become abusive, right?
We saw that with the Canadian trucker protest a little bit.
And it's interesting. That protest was what led to Bobby Kennedy getting involved in Bitcoin.
Yeah.
He saw that.
He really saw that.
He's like,
I get it now.
This is interesting. Yeah. The government's grabbing these guys' money and they're using Bitcoin as an alternative. Wow.
Yeah. For skeptics who dismiss Bitcoin as just a toy or a mere fad, doubting the significance of digital scarcity, consider this. In just 15 years, Bitcoin has risen to become the 10th largest currency worldwide by circulating supply. Catapulting from zero to the 10th largest world currency in 15 years is staggering. So for people, I would say this is the one aspect of the characteristic of money that there's this characteristic called acceptability, right? Which is the one thing that Bitcoin's, ranks
still pretty low,
on other, because it's so new, right?
Yeah, right.
So,
nobody knows what it is.
But that is changing drastically. Which you point out here, and have this interesting chart to show these different currencies here. The next chapter, fiat empowers the state. How does fiat empower the state?
Well, it allows them to do things without taxing the people. They do the stealth tax of inflation. I mean, as we've talked about, they can spend money that they don't have, and that's really all of our money.
Yeah,
and so it and they can use that money to, suppress us, right? I mean, they can, create a police state. They can, take away our rights. They can take away our money. They can do all kinds of things. States live on fiat money.
You use this term in your book, peak centralization. We've reached this period of peak centralization. Do you want to unpack that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. Let's talk about that. So I think it's very interesting what happened. I mean, in the early 1800s, I mean, America was just a nation of, farmers and laborers. And over the course of the Industrial Revolution, what they discovered is that by doing things at scale, they could do them more cheaply. So Andrew Carnegie made steel at scale, and Rockefeller, drilled oil at scale. And that process continued. And throughout that process, there were great efficiencies achieved, right? So everything got cheaper and better and all that kind of stuff. And, we just kept building up scale. And, a huge part of that scale build was when Henry Ford developed the assembly line. And suddenly we could make cars at scale. And, and what's amazing, and this is the benefit of a productivity increase, by creating the assembly line, he was able to pay his workers twice the average going wage. And then the workers could afford the cars.
Incredible. I saw that.
Talk about a win-win, right? I mean, this is Okay,
We talk about this somewhere in the book.
Yeah, and so it kept getting better and better, and we just, okay, if scale makes things cheaper, let's continue to create scale. Well, as it turns out, you get to a certain size and you might lose control of the machine. and what I like to say is World War II demonstrated the risks of peak scale. Because we learned how to slaughter people on an industrial level, right? I mean, we had bombs and weapons and so forth, and the other governments grew at scale. I mean, we started off as small decentralized government, a bunch of states, and of course the Civil War helped to centralize things more, and that centralization grew and grew, and governments became more and more powerful. And then what happened is we saw that if a madman got control of your government, as Hitler did in Germany. He could start a war, and then he could use these tools that we made at scale, airplanes, bombs, et cetera, to kill, 40 million people died in World War II, right? I mean, and so that's the disadvantage. There were economies of scale that made life better, but there were diseconomies of scale or limits to scale.
You use that term, diseconomies of scale.
That allowed people to do bad shit at scale, and we didn't want that. And what I think we've kind of seen is we're going. Thankfully, we got to that point, and maybe it's God-given. Who knows? But we're now going back in the other direction towards more distributed and
decentralized.
Decentralized, was the word I was looking for. Right, decentralized systems, and what really brought that on, and I talk about this in the book, was the microprocessor. And computers came along, and when Shockley and those guys developed, a computer chip, and then it became a larger computer, and then it became personal computers, and then it became the internet. We've now gotten to the stage where you and I can be the New York Times. I mean, the New York Times used to control the written word. Yeah. And, anybody can put a Substack up and compete with the New York Times right now.
They're not making it very difficult.
No, and they're not making it very difficult because they lie, cheat, and steal. Yeah. So, but the point is that, and that's been a very, very good thing. I mean, Joe Rogan and Tucker Carlson are taking away the power of the networks. I mean, when I was a kid, we had 3 networks. And literally, they told us what the world was going on in the world, and you had to accept it. And that was it. There was no alternative view. The Warren Commission said that Lee Harvey Oswald killed Kennedy, and sure enough, America bought it. Even but that's all changed, and thankfully for the better. And it continues to change. And so now we all get to make our own decisions about who we listen to and what we believe. And so that, they can tell us lies like they did in COVID, but we can debunk them very quickly. And spread the word about the alternative case. So, it's a beautiful thing. I mean, this decentralization that's taking place. And by the way, it's what's going to save us. And, of course, one of the biggest points of pain in the decentralization was in the money. Because they could centralize the money, they did, the dollar. Because they could control it, they do, through the Federal Reserve. They could screw us. And what we've now got a tool. Satoshi gifted us with a tool that allows us to fight back and say, no, we're not going to play in that game anymore. We're going to keep our own money.
But don't you know, Larry, you're supposed to own nothing and be happy.
Well, that's right.
Eat some crickets, shut up, and fucking be happy, man.
The World Economic Forum has to will someday go down as one of the most evil things that ever existed in humankind.
I mean, do they not look at themselves in the mirror and like the stuff they're saying? It's just like,
I don't know how they do it.
Living in a fantasy land.
I don't know how they do it. I mean,
they think we know what's good for you, peasant.
that really, they might as well say that.
Mindset,
they might as well say that. Yeah.
You know what's interesting is that obviously one of my favorite books of all time is The Sovereign Individual.
I love that book.
And like you kind of when you say we're at peak centralization, it just reminded me of one of the central themes of that book, that human history goes through these periods of we start in this decentralization, and then we boom, we're farmers, and now we're farmers, and we're in cities now. We've centralized, and then boom, we go through these periods of centralization and decentralization. And the Roman Empire is this period of centralization and then boom, after they fuck up the money and do all this bullshit and steal from everybody. We kind of decentralize back to being like serfs essentially. And then now we're in this period of peak centralization where we've got a huge nation states,
right?
And those guys who wrote that book, like in the 90s, man, they literally predicted Bitcoin. It's like fascinating to see their predictions. And,
they were really smart.
They didn't get everything right, but man, just to like see the foresight of thinking of like how the future was going to change. And just what you said, we were at this peak centralization, and now we're starting to have some tools to decentralize, and we're transitioning to a different period of history, I think, back to a more decentralized world. And I think that a more decentralized world with all of the tools we have today is going to be a much less violent world.
Absolutely. It'll be better. It'll be fairer. You'll actually have some input.
this is probably one of my favorite sections of this chapter. The third world Bitcoin use cases.
Isn't it great?
I mean, this is what really, gets me excited,
Right.
and makes me passionate about Bitcoin. And most people who live in America have no clue about any of this, right?
Right. Well, as Alex, who wrote the book about this, says, check your financial privilege. We really all are privileged, and we forget that as bad as the dollar is, we've lived in a relatively stable system. I mean, imagine you live in Central Africa.
Yeah. People have no clue.
Yeah, right.
I'll read some excerpts here. In regions where traditional banking infrastructure is lacking or unreliable, Bitcoin emerges as a lifeline. With nothing more than a smartphone and internet connection, individuals gain access to a borderless financial system that operates beyond the reach of oppressive regimes and unstable economies. Bitcoin's true power lies not in its price charts, but in its ability to grant sovereignty to unbanked and censored populations worldwide. Most people don't know that, here you wrote, on a planet of 8 billion people, only 13% use the major stable currencies such as the US dollar, euro, Japanese yen, Great British pound, Australian dollar, Canadian dollar, or Swiss franc. Less than half the global population lives in a somewhat stable currency regime. Yeah. People in America hear that like this is why Bitcoin is so interesting, because so many different people are buying, people are like, oh, is it uncorrelated? Is it correlated? People are buying Bitcoin for totally different reasons.
Absolutely.
You've got like the Michael Saylors who want to have like a treasury for their company. You've got nation states who see it as a geopolitical tool. You've got you and me who see it as sound money. It also see it as, all, these other amazing things. But people in these third world countries.
You've got these remittance cases. I mean, that's another big area where people would work in a first world country and they want to send money to their relatives in a third world country, and they're getting ripped off.
It's incredibly exploitative. I mean, that's like you send $100 and they get 60, and then they get robbed when they show up at the Western Union. It
doesn't work out well.
Yeah, it's not. So this transformative power of Bitcoin in developing nations, it is often eludes privileged elites who have benefited from our fiat currency system, right? So there's a great video that I had my team do a clip on recently. It's from the Human Rights Foundation, where they play this. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's Charlie Munger and Bill Gates and all these guys that making their little statements about why Bitcoin's horrible.
Rat poison
squared. Yeah, they play those little clips, and then at the end they've got like you described here, they've got these people in third world countries that give their testimony on why this is so important, right? Like money is the central ability of humans to conduct trade and improve their lives.
Exactly.
Like that's the only way we can do that, right? So money is so important, and we in the first world,
we take it for granted.
Like we don't realize that, like, hey, all this banking infrastructure and access to bank accounts and all this stuff, like this doesn't exist for over half the world. Like people that live in some of these countries don't even have identification.
We think we have it bad. Yeah. I mean, if you're in Nairobi, you lose 10 or 20% of your purchasing power every year. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Good luck going through KYC, AML, and all this bullshit that doesn't exist. They don't even have identification. I mean, you're living literally. I mean,
they are robbing you. Yeah. They're robbing those people every year.
Yeah. So you give some great examples here from Gladstein's book, and there's just so many examples. But this idea of freedom from debasement and revaluation. There's this guy from Fode Diop from Senegal. Basically they revalued his money. They cut it in half overnight. The French government International Monetary Fund devalued the CFA franc by 50% overnight. His education was in jeopardy. Fortunately, he found another alternative. There's him. There's one of my favorites is Layla Farzan, a female Afghan computer programmer who was fortunate to be paid in Bitcoin. When the Taliban forced her to flee Afghanistan to Germany, she faced a treacherous overland journey, during which she was robbed by dishonest middlemen and common thieves, losing all her cash and jewelry. But she kept her Bitcoin seed phrases safe. She protected her 2.5 Bitcoin, now worth over $250,000. Isn't that fat?
That's a pretty cool story, isn't it?
Man. It almost gets you emotional. It's like you really see the importance of
and yet a Buffett will say Bitcoin is rat poison.
Yeah. You mentioned remittance costs, as we just talked about. I mean, there's so many.
There are a lot of use cases that are very friendly to people who are being abused.
Yeah. Nigeria is another example. So these Nigerians are some of the smartest people in the world.
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
Some of the highest IQs I think I've seen are Nigerians, and they are waking up. They're seeing what's happening with the Naira, and I've been watching this play out over the past 5 to 10 years. And the government bans Bitcoin, and Bitcoin adoption goes up in Nigeria. It's fascinating.
How are you going to ban it?
Good luck.
Good luck.
Good luck. Right. So, and the Naira has lost 90% of its value over the past 5 to 10 years, right? So they see what's happening. So you hear in your book, you say that an estimated 35% of Nigerians now use Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies for savings and transactions, an impressive adoption rate when only 50 to 60% of the population has internet access or owns a smartphone. It's crazy to see I looked at a chart too that showed like the youth compared to the older generations. It's like 90% penetration. So like,
so the youth are like really
the
high
youth are like a huge high percentage of it. So, but that's the future of your country, right?
Of course.
That's the future of Nigeria is the younger generation that has access to the internet and understands the technology and things, and is going to be in 5 to 10, 15 years.
That makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
That's the whole country.
Yeah. So they're seeing what's happening and understanding, and like they're not going to be taken advantage of anymore. Like they're, the government says, oh, it's banned, and then boom, adoption goes up 10%. I love this.
I missed that. I didn't see it. That's great.
No, it was like. This was in China. Not
China, I know they banned it, but people are still doing it.
Yeah, China banned Bitcoin mining, and actually, if you came back 6 months later and like kind of like looked at it after it was all said and done, you look at the hash rate, and it's like there's more hash rate now in China than there was before the ban.
Is that right?
It's an unbelievable.
That is unbelievable.
Yeah, 6 to 12 months later,
it dropped.
Yeah, it dropped initially. A bunch of stuff, but after 6 to 12 months, I believe they looked at the data.
They brought it back,
and they were able to determine that it was actually. They actually had more hash rate than they did before the ban. So if the most communist government on earth can't ban.
Before the ETF, I recall all my friends saying the biggest problem with Bitcoin is the governments were going to ban it. And, there's no doubt that some governments would like to have banned it. They should have early days if they were going to.
Yeah, that would have been the time to try to do it. But even then, still, it's impossible.
The bottom line is you can't.
Yeah.
You can't shut down the internet.
Good luck, because that's why we have hash rate nodes all over the world. It's like these countries, a lot of these countries hate each other, which Bitcoin takes that into account and says, hey, we don't care. Like this is, you can plug in the system.
No matter what.
Exactly. The other question I wanted to ask you about is what's your opinion? I know like so many things in life are about incentives, right? With the Bill Gates and the Charlie Mungers and all these guys. It's like, you wrote that they dislike Bitcoin because it threatens the system that enabled them to amass their wealth. Figures like Warren Buffett, Bill Gates, and Charlie Munger are in this category. Do you think that this is just like, do they actually, they just haven't done they just haven't looked into it because there's just not an incentive for them to do it?
Now, this is interesting. I actually had an interchange with somebody on Twitter recently about this particular topic. I actually, these men are smart men. Okay. We can't deny that.
Yeah.
My sense is they all know exactly what it is. And think about it. Let's take Warren Buffett example, right? Recently he mentioned Stein's law at his annual meeting. He mentioned the possibility of currency failure, et cetera. He understands what Bitcoin is perfectly. Here's the thing. He won in a system that was based on fiat. And so, he's at the end of his life and he's saying, look at me, I'm the winner.
Yeah.
And we come along and we say, yeah, that's great, Mr. Buffett, you're the winner, but you were playing in a rigged system.
Yeah.
And, congratulations for winning this rigged game. Well, if he admitted that it was a rigged game and that Bitcoin is a better form of money, that would imply that his entire life's work was meaningless. And he's not going to do that. So he needs to, for mental self-protection reasons, he needs to say, hey, this is bullshit. It'll never work, and you shouldn't go in that direction. And that's what I think is going on.
Yeah,
but to say he doesn't, I think he completely understands it. He's too smart not to understand it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
The only thing that I could that would go against that thought for me would be like how he treated other technological innovations in the past. Like apparently he was friends with like Bill Gates for many years, and like apparently wouldn't invest in his company because he's like, I don't understand this.
Yeah.
So that's the only thing that kind of was like,
maybe I see your point.
Maybe he's really just unless he really deeply understands it and like has done the research.
Well, I doubt that he understands the difficulty adjustment and all that kind of stuff.
But like the way his brain works is like he needs to understand all of those things before he's going to, because
very possibly
with the companies he invests into, he goes like into the reports and, I can't remember his type of investing. What's it called? He's
value
investing.
Yeah, no, he's great detail.
He's just really like, and I can understand how, the older generation specifically would struggle grasping some of these concepts. I mean, you grew up in a world without all this stuff, right? So
fair enough. Fair enough.
I don't know.
It might be that, but I think he fully understands it's an alternative currency.
Yeah.
It's just not one that makes him look good.
Yeah. No, I get that too, for sure. I'm going to read another quote here because this is like, I love this chapter. Financial privilege is embedded in our world and has steered the course of history. It has shifted powers from the haves to the have-nots. I'm sorry, for the have-nots to the haves. It is getting worse. But guess what? Bitcoin is going to obliterate financial privilege. This new currency, where everyone is considered equal in the eyes of the protocol, no matter whether you live in Gaza or Tel Aviv, Havana or Miami, Dakar or Paris, Washington or Caracas. The Bitcoin protocol does not care about your level of wealth, color of your skin, beliefs, family history, religion, or nationality. It is neutral and cannot discriminate. Wow.
Isn't that beautiful?
That's a beautiful statement from Alex Gladstein.
Alex Gladstein said that.
Yeah. And then obviously we've really touched on this. There's so many great quotes, but this idea of Bitcoin and defunding war. Most people hate taxes and will only bear so much before they mount opposition to taxation. Yet governments have figured out a workaround to this issue. Through monetary inflation, they can spend much more than they collect in taxes, funding initiatives that fail to serve their citizens' best interest, the worst of which is war. Ron Paul has this great quote. Following the creation of the Fed, the government would discover other uses for an elastic money supply aside from keeping the banking system from defaulting on its obligations. It would prove useful in funding war. It is no coincidence that the century of total war coincided with the century of central banking. Wow.
Yeah, that's a powerful quote.
That's a powerful quote.
Ron Paul totally have seen this and got it. I mean, talk about a gem among the political class. I mean, there's never been another one. He's really something.
Armed with central banks to cover liabilities, European governments went to war 1 year after the Fed was created. I mean, the correlation doesn't imply causality, but damn.
Isn't it interesting?
Isn't it interesting, right? Oh, man. So you talked a little bit about your kind of like your personal testimony. I thought was interesting because I didn't live through any of these eras. So reading about your life and your story here is just so fascinating to me. Tell me about this. The older guys in your neighborhood were being drafted and sent to Vietnam.
Oh, yeah.
Younger guys were receiving lottery draft numbers, and I missed what was going on. How
that was awful.
It just seems like a different world.
The Vietnam War was an awful thing. The country was torn apart, and it started as a police action. They killed Kennedy, and Johnson ramped it up, and then of course Nixon continued it. And the theory at the time, it was widely distributed, was Henry Kissinger saying it was a domino theory. We couldn't let this communist North Vietnam dominate the more democratic South Vietnam, and we therefore had to go and defend the Democrats in the South. It was just stupid. I mean, we had no business being there, and it was all trumped up. Again, the domino theory was if it fell, that communism would spread everywhere, and we were of course terrified of communism. And so, but yeah, I lived in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and the university was there, and there were all kinds of anti-war protests going on. And I mean, the one thing that some portion of the boomer generation did right was, they really actively opposed the war. I mean, they realized that this was just stupid. We should not be killing Vietnamese people or American people in Indochina. And so, I personally, I was, scared about it in the sense that, I saw guys getting drafted, and we heard about people dying, and I was of the age where it ended before I became draft eligible, but I was getting close. I turned 18 in 1974 or 5, and the war was over in 73. But as we led up to it, I was thinking to myself, wow, am I going to have to go for this? Because my father had been in the military, and I thought I'd probably have to enlist or go into the military. And it was a terrible time. I mean, it was a really. I mean, as there were riots at the Democratic Convention in 1968. There were anti-war protests all over the country, and I think I pointed out in the book. I think what really catalyzed the end was the Kent State shooting. I mean, it was stunning.
I didn't even know about this. I'd never even historically learned about this.
Oh my God! I mean. So, there was an anti-war protest in Kent State in 1970, and they called in the National Guard. And I don't know all the specifics of who said what when to who, but the bottom line is the guard and the students started tussling with each other, and the guard had rifles, and they pulled out rifles, and they shot 4 students dead.
Wow, that's unbelievable.
I mean, and I mean, it was talk about a wake-up call for the nation.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
You talk about what your dad told you here. I thought that was incredibly key. They will have to end this.
I mean, it was. And he said, "Look, this is over." Yeah. I mean, at that point in time, I mean, when soldiers were killing American students who were protesting the war, I mean, WTF?
What the fuck?
Right? Yeah, WTF? And at that point in time, I'm sure Nixon and Kissinger and others. I mean, they started peace negotiations. Sadly, it dragged on for a few more years, and they bombed North. I mean, there was a lot of bad shit that happened. When you watch the documentaries on the Vietnam War, you'll see that just for political reasons, they kept killing people. I mean, we carpet bombed North Vietnam. It was tragic. Just tragic.
I watched the simulation of that because this was obviously well before my time, but you kind of watched it was just kind of like how the North pushed the South to the brink, and then the South pushed the North to the brink, and then boom, they win here, and it's just the battle lines, and then boom, at the end of the day, it's just right back to where it was all
just senseless killing. Yeah. It was tragic.
It's just
it's just tragic.
All these people died, and at the end of the day, you're just right back where you started.
All the lives lost. It's just tragic. But thank God eventually, and bravo for the protesters for helping to end that war, because who knows, they might have continued it and tried to push to make it bigger, et cetera. So, but thankfully it did end.
This is a famous quote by President Eisenhower. so much American history, so much great history and historical quotes in this book, Larry. I think that's probably one of my favorite parts of your book is I learned so much, and you just get to go back in time and hear from people that altered and changed the course and contributed to history, great American presidents.
And the thing I think is really important is that there's the sanitized version of history that the people in power have now written. Right.
Yeah.
And then there's actually the real history.
Yeah. It is unbelievable, man. When I interviewed Dominic Frisby and we went to his Civil War chapter, we talk about the tariffs and all this stuff. It's you're just told, Lincoln did it to end slavery. And then,
free the slaves.
And then you just read quotes from Lincoln where he's I don't care if I have to end this war by not freeing the slaves, by freeing the slaves, or by doing, what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
It's
it's not what we've been told.
Yeah, it's just they just whitewash it and put a narrative.
The victors write the history.
Yeah. It's crazy. But this quote by Eisenhower, I mean, I think this is a very famously well understood quote. So I did recognize this, but it is really a powerful case for show me the incentives and I'll show you the outcome. Right.
Right.
In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist.
Yeah, Eisenhower was a very smart man. He architected the winning of World War II for the United States, and I think he could see the trend that we were following, and he warned of it, and that was very prescient of him to make that statement. And what he described has actually come true. I mean, the military-industrial complex, in my opinion, does hold far too much power in this country, and is what's actually perpetuated all of these wars that we've fought.
I didn't know this, and you wrote this in your book, that the military-industrial complex has captured our political system. I mean, I knew that, but the second part was wild, that it has strategically located contractor factories in nearly every state and makes huge campaign donations to legislators who vote to fund defense contracts.
Yeah.
I think, I don't want to say it was Thomas Massey or somebody recently posted this the other day. It was we're on the brink of all this bankruptcy, but the military is getting a higher budget this year. Is
yeah, I know. Isn't it horrible? I mean, I like Trump, okay, but in many ways, but I'm really disappointed that the defense budget's getting larger. I mean, I was at an event with David Stockman, who was Nixon's budget, or not Nixon's, Reagan's budget director, and I sat with him privately, and there's so much fat in the defense budget. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable.
It really is, man. It really is. I mean, there's,
and that's all because of the lobbying efforts.
I hope Doge can get in there and really do some cuts. I mean, I think part of the issue too is that they're trying to. This might be a force projection thing, because if you've got the Russia-Ukraine thing, we've got the Gaza-Palestine thing,
I get
the Iran thing now. So I'm thinking in my head, what is the legitimate argument for this right now?
Yeah, I get it.
Best case scenario for me would be help negotiate end to all these wars and then drop the budget that.
But the question is, do you really need the budget anyway? I mean, I think what you'd see, I think what a good geopolitical analyst or military analyst would tell you is that we're actually spending money on stuff that's stupid.
Oh, no doubt.
I mean, as an example,
it doesn't shock me at all.
You're right. As an example, they're now talking about a new class of fighter jet. And it's arguable that fighter jets aren't going to be that important in a new war. I mean, one of the things that exactly,
I mean, that's the future of
I mean, one of the things that terrifies me actually is how drone technology is so advanced in China.
It's unbelievable.
And I've heard stories from military people that they've got these little drones that can basically, if you were out on a battlefield, they could send these drones out and they would heat seek you. They would figure out who that you're a human.
Yeah.
And they would just, they've got a little munition in them. They just fly into you and kill you.
It's fucking crazy.
Right? I mean,
It's fucking crazy.
So, I mean, I don't know about you, but I don't want to fight in a war where I can get killed by a drone.
Me either, man.
Right.
I mean, that's the future of warfare, though. I mean,
well, that's my point. That's my point. And so here we are. We've got the military-industrial complex pushing for a new fighter jet class. I know that I've read. I can't remember the numbering on it, but it's out there. It's in the public. And I'm like, hang on a second. Why are we building new fighter jets? We got to build anti-drone technology.
Yeah.
Or we got to build our own drones. I mean, it's like we're not even spending the money on the right stuff.
Yeah, that was part of the big thing that was happening in the Red Sea there with the Strait of Hormuz and stuff. It's like, you've got the Houthis are using $300 drones and taking out $5 million, U.S. equipment. It's like, what the fuck? Well, that doesn't math out, right? Like,
exactly,
that's not a sustainable path.
War has become very, very asymmetric.
Yeah.
Which again, actually, I kind of, funny backward way, actually argues for decentralization. If you don't have a big empire, you don't have big warships.
Yeah.
I would like to think, I think one of the outcomes of this fourth turning might be we get a lot smaller political entities. Maybe we break up into a bunch of states or a bunch of regions. Maybe countries split up.
That would be nice. I already feel more loyal to the state of Florida than I do to the country. I hate to say it, but I would be perfectly fine saying, hey, I'll just be a Floridian and, I don't want to pay 30% of my income to fund all these wars and bullshit.
Right. And if Californians want to live in a really liberal way, well, let them. They're not going to live there.
Yeah, exactly. I feel the same way. I feel exactly the same way. I do feel proud to be an American, but at the same time, it's like, look what they're doing. Look what Doge is exposing right now. Look at the breadth of the corruption and kleptocracy and nonsense that's occurring. I don't want to participate in that. I don't want to pay for that.
I agree with you.
I don't want to pay for Hillary Clinton's daughter to fucking have a, $20 million NGO, and then she uses half the money to go buy herself a house, and it's like, it's crazy. It's so corrupt. And of course, this is happening across the political spectrum on both sides of the aisle, right? Of course, there's massive corruption, but it just got to end. It's insane. It's insane. I think that I told you the other day about how Doge found out that the Department of Education has a $5 billion COVID slush fund that they're using. They still have access to, and it's like there's no receipts, there's no nothing. They're renting out stadiums, they're doing all this stuff and just essentially stealing from the taxpayers, right? So, I don't want to fund that. I don't want to participate in that, and I should be able to opt out of that. I feel
you should. I agree.
You wrote here, I am a strong anti-war proponent. I believe that sound money will help to eliminate wars. There will be no way to pay for them. This is a central theme of what we've talked about throughout this series, but it really is so true, and it's so important to emphasize that there is no printer button that you can hit with Bitcoin to do this stuff. People have to actually really believe, okay, this war is existential, and send that money, right? If America was under attack, you better believe everybody in America would be wanting to defend America, right?
Of course.
But if we're going to Vietnam and some country we've never heard of, or doing this over here,
if China invades California, they're going to find out what rednecks really like to do.
There you go. Exactly, right? So if the war is existential, you better believe Americans will step up to defend.
Absolutely.
Right? But we're not going to say, hey, we need to get involved with North Vietnam and South Vietnam, and people could never even point those things out on a map. It was
that's the thing.
Like World War I, for example. If you pulled 90, I bet you 98% of Americans at that time of that war had no idea who Franz Ferdinand was. Had no idea. You couldn't point out Austria and Serbia on a map. I bet 9 out of 10 people would not even have a clue,
and they didn't
would
care.
miss.
They didn't care.
Yeah.
Well, and there was a big isolationist movement. There were a lot of people that said, America first. We shouldn't do it.
Yeah.
And but we got sucked into it.
Yeah. Crazy. This I thought was interesting. So you wrote that you went to Vietnam twice for business.
Yeah.
But in Saigon, which is now Ho Chi Minh City, I felt comfortable. But this was a marked contrast to how I felt in Hanoi. There, I sensed a strong anti-Western sentiment from people I met and saw. Frankly, who could blame them? They surely all had relatives who they lost in the war. Explain that to me. It was just a different.
You could just feel it. So, the Saigon is like New York City. It's bustling. It's the commerce center. It's they love Americans, etc. It was all people were friendly. It was great. Hanoi is like Washington. It's like the Washington D.C. equivalent. It's the government headquarters of Vietnam, and they obviously fought in the war, and there were millions of people that died in that war, at least a million, probably more. It's hard to know the exact number, But as I say, and I was, and there are not a lot of Westerners there. You don't walk around and see a lot of Caucasian people. I mean, almost everyone is Asian that's there. And so as I was walking around and talking to people, I just didn't sense any. I mean, I sensed in some cases I actually felt. I mean, I try and take a picture, and they'd run up to me and say, "You can't do that," or
Really?
yeah. I mean, I sensed the hostility, just a general tone of hostility, and like I say, who could blame them? I mean, people like me, Caucasian people, had killed, their relatives, and I suspect they're still quite bitter about it. And who would blame them, right?
Interesting.
But you get that feeling, yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of, we mentioned the drones. Like, I just had a note because I was just in Dubai and there's these drone shows going on, right? Like,
right. Oh,
you see the capabilities of just like commercially available drones, right?
Yeah.
Just like stuff that anybody could go buy. But they're putting on these just elaborate drones.
Light shows. I've seen those.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. Isn't it
right?
impressive?
Yeah. I mean, like a company or an individual can access that. Like, you can't even. It's hard to even fathom what like the ones that are capable of like really high military grade stuff are capable of. I mean, like,
yeah,
it's crazy. Right?
Well, and the other thing is, I mean, think about these robots. I mean, you got these robotic dogs, you got these robotic warriors. I mean, look, I mean, it's entirely possible that, as Saylor kind of says, the wars of the future are going to be fought in cyberspace.
Yeah, no doubt. Here's one thing that I can relate to, right? Which is the Iraq and Afghanistan wars, right? You wrote here about the 9/11 attacks and how we responded to that, and obviously that was horrible what happened, but just spending $8 trillion in 30. Here we are, 20 years later, or whatever. I remember being a kid.
What do we get for it?
Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Yeah. Tons of people died, tons of death and destruction, and the Taliban was in control at the beginning, and now they're back in control now.
Yeah, exactly.
And plus they have $1 trillion or $500 billion
now they got all
military
our
equipment
tanks
and technology. Like, it's just unbelievable. The breadth of the incompetence that occurred to allow all this is just insane.
Yeah.
Imagine what we could have done with that $8 trillion to improve things here in America, rebuild our infrastructure, cities, schools, all of this stuff.
Nuclear power, high-speed transit.
Exact. I mean, unbelievable, right?
Yeah, they set a trap and we fell for it.
Yeah, no doubt. And then I go to a place like Dubai and you just see the infrastructure as like, this is unbelievable, right?
Yeah,
like,
or I don't know if you've been to China yet. I mean, I've been to Shanghai and Beijing.
I have not. I'm a little nervous.
Oh, it's nervous in today's world, it might not be where you want to go.
Yeah.
But I've been there a couple times in the past, and what they did there, I mean, Shanghai is just amazing. I mean, it used to be Water Buffalo and a small place called the Strand, which was developed in the 1800s by Europeans, and now it looks twice as large and twice as modern as Manhattan.
Wow,
it's something else.
Yeah, wow. By returning to sound money, we can defund government malfeasance and push back against this harmful centralization. And you've got a great quote here from Friedrich Hayek, which is one of my favorites. And I think Aaron Van Weerdum actually has it as the intro to his book. But he goes, "I don't believe we shall ever have a good money again before we take the thing out of the hands of government. And we can't take it violently. All we can do is by some sly roundabout way, introduce something that they can't stop."
Yeah. And that's really what Bitcoin is.
Unbelievable.
I mean, it's amazing.
What a great quote.
I mean, Bitcoin's kind of God-given in my view.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, we were, God looked down and said, okay, you guys are really screwed up. You got a broken system. You're never going to be able to fix it unless I give you a tool. Here's the tool.
Yeah. It's unbelievable. The last chapter of this section of the podcast we're going to do is the chapter on skepticism. So I'll read. There's some fantastic.
So first of all, let me give a hat tip to my wife.
Yeah.
Throughout my wife contributed enormously to this entire book because she was my test case. She's not a Bitcoiner. I mean, she believes in Bitcoin, but she's not a finance person. She's marketing, sales, writing and advertising. But I said, I want you to read this and tell me what you understand, what you don't understand, how I can make this better. And she said, one of the things you've got to do is write a chapter on skepticism.
Oh my gosh.
Right. And pull out all the ways that in the past that, people said things wouldn't work. And of course they did. And so this chapter is her idea.
Well, yeah, this is, it's hilarious. I love this chapter. Just reading the quotes. I have in my notes, I just put LOL by anything. LOL. But,
it's kind of stunning how wrong so many people were about new things when they came along.
Gosh.
But
it's not just right. It's not just like unknown people either. I mean, they're literally like, I think you got an Albert Einstein quote in here.
Yeah,
people can miss things, right?
Yes, and that's what I'm trying to say. It's very easy to get set in your ways and to see something new and go, "Oh, that's not going to work."
Yeah, Innovations often undergo a gradual adoption phase until their utility becomes obvious, eventually leading to the suddenly phase of widespread adoption or acceptance. We talk about this with Bitcoin. There's a quote that's, gradually then suddenly, we kind of say.
Parker Lewis.
Yeah, Parker Lewis quote. But throughout history, mankind has often resisted or been afraid of change. We have examples like the Luddites and the Red Flag Act. There's a section here that I pulled out, which is kind of funny. Perhaps the most striking parallel comes from the 1865 Locomotive Act in Britain. Early automobiles posed such a threat to the railroad and horse carriage industries that objectors successfully lobbied for laws requiring a man with a red flag to walk 60 yards ahead of any motorized vehicle. The railroad lobby, assisted by the horse carriage lobby, effectively limited cars to 4 miles per hour. These laws were passed on the pretext that collisions must be prevented, and they crippled the British automotive industry for decades until the repeal starting in 1896 to 1903. I mean, this sounds familiar. Like government they do all this bullshit and stuff. It's just, it's like,
well, and the lobbies, right? I mean, the railroad, and the horse carriage guys.
I mean, this is not.
And they're like these cars, and we don't like this shit at all. I mean, just change that to Bitcoin and the banks.
No doubt. Yeah. It's even AI now. I mean, you're seeing this right now with artificial intelligence. It's like we can't afford to lose this one. Like you got all these people like, oh, this is going to end the world, and this, that, and the other. It's like, we can't afford to have China take the lead on these stuff.
Correct.
Right. It's like, some of the stuff is existential, right?
It is
crypto,
important.
we have the same thing with crypto. Like, it's just, we got to have freedom to be able to operate and to do things. And that's how, we have breakthroughs. But it just reminds me of, that, like these lobbies, these things, that's not real capitalism. That's crony capitalism.
Correct.
Like, that's what the cronyism is.
That's right.
They're able to lobby and change the government to prevent a free market.
Yeah, it's political, political stuff that makes all of our lives worse. Yeah.
All right. So I'm going to read some. These are gems, man. I can't wait to read some of these. All right. So we got the telephone in 1878. The Americans have need of the telephone, but we do not. We have plenty of messenger boys.
That's a British guy.
Oh, my God. William Henry Preece, the chief engineer of the British Post Office. I wish I could have Dominic Frisby read that. This is classic. Then we've got light bulbs. Everyone acquainted with the subject will recognize Thomas Edison's experiments as a conspicuous failure, trumpeted as a wonderful success. So there's Henry Morton, who was the president of the Stevens Institute of Technology. So he's the head of an institute of technology saying this about the light bulb.
Yeah.
Lynn Alden posts this anti-electricity cartoon. It's classic.
Yeah.
The automobile, 1899. The ordinary horseless carriage is at present a luxury for the wealthy, and although its price will probably fall in the future, it will never, of course, come into as a common use as the bicycle. The Literary Digest, just replace that with the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal, whatever. Yeah. Oh man, these are so good. The airplanes, 1911. So we've got Marshal Ferdinand Foch, the supreme commander of the Allied armies in World War I. Airplanes are interesting toys, but of no military value.
World War II was basically decided in the air.
Yeah. Oh my God. So sound in movies. I guess this is one
Isn't it amazing?
I've never heard of.
Yeah.
Like sound, like actually being able to hear people talk in a movie. Somebody goes, the presidents of United Artists, right? I don't think people will want talking pictures. Talking doesn't belong in pictures.
Isn't that amazing?
Oh my gosh. Nuclear power. So this is one from Albert Einstein. But I actually have a question about this one, but this is, so he goes, there is not the slightest indication that nuclear energy will ever be obtainable. Did you watch the movie Oppenheimer?
Yeah, sure. I love it.
So I'm wondering if
well, he changed his views. Obviously, this was extremely early in his career, and it might have even been before he did his MC2 squared. So, but yes, he said that earlier in his career before, because he was a participant in the whole thought pattern of how to split the atom. In fact, he pushed, as I recall, Roosevelt to do it.
Really? Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah, he said, look, the Germans are probably doing this. We need to do it too.
In the movie, they kind of made it seem like almost he was somebody who was against it almost. Like they kind of like portrayed him as like he kind
I
of
can't recall that.
he almost played dumb to prevent it. Like it's like he kind of got that vibe from the movie.
Maybe I think he may have realized the implications of nuclear weapons and therefore
that's kind of
been
against
it. But I remember reading in some of the history I've read that he was very much aware and played a role in making others aware of the fact that others were doing it. Germany was doing it, and we needed to do it too.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Wow. There's so many of these. They're just so great. Computers. I mean, the guy from IBM, I think there's a world market for about 5 computers. And this is literally, Thomas J. Watson.
Yeah, well, he changed.
Yeah, I know.
He changed.
But that was just fun.
Very early on. That was like early 1960s, late 50s. Yeah.
Yeah, so he changed it up. But then there's, this is the all-time best one from Paul Krugman, which is, where he talks about the internet. The growth of the internet will slow drastically as the flaw in Metcalfe's law, which states that the number of potential connections in a network is proportional to the square of the number of participants, becomes apparent. Most people have nothing to say to each other. Was he wrong.
Isn't that amazing? I mean, you couldn't be more wrong.
Oh my God. By 2005 or so, it will become clear that the internet's impact on the economy has been no greater than the fax machines. Paul Krugman, 1998 winner of the Nobel Prize in Economics.
Yeah, right.
I mean, unbelievable. So we've got all these same skeptics when it comes to Bitcoin. And Paul Krugman's right back at it again. We'll read some of these Bitcoin skeptics. Today, these Bitcoin skeptics echo yesterday's epic miscalculations. Crypto assets are highly volatile. See Bitcoin and therefore not really useful as a store of value. There's Jerome Powell, who is our current head of the Federal Reserve. Nouriel Roubini, Bitcoin is the mother of all bubbles.
Yeah,
I think Bitcoin's actually the pin.
Exactly.
Not the bubble.
Yeah, the bubbles and fiat.
Yeah, we've got Charlie Munger with I don't like fraud or delusion, and delusion may be larger than the fraud. Warren Buffett, Bitcoin is rat poison squared. And then our good friend Paul Krugman added again, Bitcoin is a bubble wrapped in techno-mysticism inside a cocoon of libertarian ideology. Oh, that one makes me laugh. And he's got another one too. He goes, Bitcoin is a combination of a bubble, a Ponzi scheme, and an environmental disaster.
Yeah.
Oh man,
he missed it on all of them.
They never. These guys are just unbelievable. Notice how many, and you point this out astutely, which is notice how many of these responses were from people whose livelihoods were threatened by the innovation they condemned.
Right.
As Upton Sinclair astutely observed, I love this quote. Yeah. It is difficult to get a man to understand something when his salary depends upon his not understanding it.
So true.
Yeah. And then you've got this idea of adoption is growing, showing the S curve. I think we show this to our meetup people as well, which is fantastic. It's really interesting, and you compare it and overlay it to other technologies, S curves. Fantastic job on that. One important thing to note out is we had this early adoption phase, and the time it takes to get to 10% is usually equal to the time it takes to get from 10.
To 90%. Martin Gladwell, I think.
Malcolm Gladwell, yeah.
Malcolm Gladwell, the tipping point.
Yeah, so the first 15 years to get to I don't even think we're at 10%. We're still early. We're like 6%. But that initial time, the next 15 years after that is going to be just unbelievable, right?
Right. We're going to go from nobody has it to everybody has it.
There you go. And we're following that same trend as all these other things. Note how rapidly the cell phone and the internet were adopted. Some have argued that Bitcoin adoption is faster than internet adoption, although they appear quite similar to me. I think that Bitcoin will be potentially faster than the internet adoption just because what the Bitcoin did for information, Bitcoin is doing for money, but also the fact that now people have kind of been primed. When the ball really starts rolling down the hill, I think people have been primed seeing other things, and I think
that's probably true. I mean, the internet is such a perfect analog for Bitcoin. Do you know what I mean? I mean, really, they're very, very comparable. I was an investor in internet companies, and so maybe that's why I understood Bitcoin more easily than some people, because I thought I've seen this movie.
You've seen this movie exactly. So that's exactly my point, is that people have kind of seen this movie,
and therefore it might come faster this time. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah, and Bitcoin is, Metcalfe's law is so important because Bitcoin, like money, is the most important social network that humans use.
Yeah, I mean, information's important, but money touches everything.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Right? Wow.
Right.
I think this is a good point to let off.
Sounds great.
All right, brother.